Good evening and welcome. My name is Justin, and on behalf of the Strand, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here this evening. Tonight, I am pleased to introduce photographer Kelly Klein with her new book, Pools Reflections. Kelly had worked as an assistant to Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren before she left to become a full-time photographer. She's done work for countless magazines, including British and French Vogue, and has written and produced 6 books of photography. This evening, she'll be in conversation with legendary creative and art director Sam Shahid. Sam has been in the advertising business for over 25 years. His Shahid Company represents clients such as Versace and Asprey, and he's been the art director for over 60 books of photography, including the subject of tonight's discussion. So join me in please welcoming Kelly Klein and Sam Shahid.
Thank you all for coming. I just wanted to explain a little bit of my relationship with Sam. It goes back to the early 80s. I think we started working for Calvin Klein at the same week, same day we started at the company. And we worked together for many years there. And, you know, we didn't work directly with each other, but we were in many, many meetings together over all those years. And eventually, Sam left, and eventually I left, and we went our separate ways. And then Sam became art director for a magazine called Marabella. And I was no longer working for Calvin, and he called me one day and he said, "Would you like to photograph a celebrity for the magazine?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I've never done that. You know, I only take snapshots." And Sam had been seeing my photographs over years and years because I'd always give him my film to develop on Monday mornings, and he would develop my weekend snapshots. So I guess he had seen my photography and how I took pictures, and I guess he thought that I could take a portrait of a celebrity for this magazine. And I'm like, well, you know, I guess I can hire an assistant and maybe they can teach me, and I don't know, that seems a bit, you know, well, who is it? You know, what's it, you know, what would it entail? Well, it might be for a cover, but you never know. But it's right now just a portrait of Warren Beatty. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like, you know, my first job as a photographer, and it's Warren Beatty. And I was like, I just don't think I can do this, you know. And he's like, oh no, don't worry, you'll be fine. Let's hire some good assistants. So that was my first real job as a real photographer. Portrait, fashion, you know, I do a little bit of both. And Sam sort of, we worked together at that magazine for a couple of years, and I continued to shoot celebrities for the magazine inside and for the cover. And we, I guess in 1992 or 1990, I came up with this idea to do an architectural photography book on pools. Only because I had gone to look for a book on swimming pools, and I wanted to build a swimming pool, and I couldn't find an inspirational book to give me ideas. So I called Sam and I said, you know, would you design this book? I have an idea, and, you know, let's make up a dummy, and maybe somebody will want to buy this idea, maybe a publisher, you know. And so we ended up doing this beautiful book together, which took about 5 years. And we've been doing books for 20 years or more, for the last at least for the last 20 years together. 6 books, photography books, architectural books, and he's been the art director on every single one of them. And our relationship working together it's like flawless. It's like I spend 3 years finding as many beautiful photographs as I can, and researching and searching the web, and just going into museums and archives and historical societies, and I find my favorite 1,000 images, and then I kind of edit it down to my favorite 500, and then I give them to Sam. And from there, Sam is brilliant at choosing which photograph to put next to which, and then to tell a story with all these photographs. And it's very hard to do when you do my type of book, because I use 200 different photographers, and they shoot at all different kinds of cameras and all different kinds of film, and Sam has to take all these different images and put them together. And he's created 6 amazing books, I think, for me, and we have a great time doing it. He's fast, he's smooth, it's easy, it's just a great experience. So I'll let Sam do a little talking now.
Well, as Kelly said, we've known each other about almost 30 years, actually. I think it was from 1982, 83. And then before I get to Marabella, when I first brought Kelly into it, the pools book, she came to me with the idea that there'd never been a book done on pools, and she wanted to do this book. And I said, great, let's do it, you know. So she started coming with some photographs, and we started making a dummy of it, just a conceptual idea of what it should be and all. And I remember the size I felt was really important. And there was a Paul Strand book at that time, and books were very big and square, and it was great. I said, Kelly, I think this size is fantastic. She said, yes, let's go for it. So we put a dummy together, and she took it, and Knopf, I think it was, published the first book. And what was really interesting at that time, that book was printed in New York, in the States. You don't see that at all anymore. But it was done by a great master printer named Sid Rappaport. And he had created the stone tone printing. And Avedon and Bruce Weber, Herb Ritz, they all went to him to have their books printed, which you don't hear of that at all now. He was comparable to what Steidl is today, and that same one press, personal, he's on the press himself. It's really an art form. So anyway, Kelly came, and I'm not going to talk more about the design of it. And then Irving Penn had a book out. Is with the leaves on the front, and I remember we loved the cloth. We discovered there was a lot of cloth left over that they didn't use, so we grabbed that quickly, and so Sid did, and we got the book done, which was really great. It was just a great experience. What's great with Kelly is that we both know each other. We know we have pretty similar tastes, and that's very important, and we come from the same place. So it makes it easier, and then, you know, it's a rhythm that happens in these books. It's the way the pacing goes, and she understood that very well, and it was just great. And so, you know, she accumulated the photographs, and it was a little different, that Pools book. A Pools book. It wasn't purely architectural. It was also life people had with the pool, and she was being in the world of fashion. If you look at the first book and all, you'll see a lot of. Steve Meisel has a picture there with Christy Turlington, all Naomi, them all in the pool. So it wasn't just architectural. It was more than that. It was a life about a pool and what people, how they relate to it and their relationships with it. Then I left, and so I was asked by Marabella to become like a guest creative director or creative director at large at that moment to come help them. And so Kelly sent me some photographs that she did of Morocco. And I thought they were so great, and I said, God, Kelly, I think you should work with us. So she did, and I remember she did Brooke Shields. I remember that, Warren Beatty. Woody Harrelson was genius. She had him in a dress. It was great, you know. I thought it was just fantastic. So anyway, we had a good life there. And then Kelly came to with other ideas of books that she personally loves. The subject matter one was Cross, which was really a beautiful book. And so, you know, she comes with these ideas, and then what's great, they're very personal to her, things that she relates to and connects to. One was the book on Horse, which I tell you, I think it's one of the great. It's huge, and it was great, and Rizzoli's was wonderful to publish the book. And then Underworld was another gorgeously produced book, and I liked the printing of it, and that's really important to me. That's what you see. You don't see the original print, so I think it's extremely important what the customer sees, or the viewer, or the reader. So anyway, then that happened, and Kelly always comes up with an idea. Cross was one. Then she did her own photographs, which we just saw for the first time since it came out, called Emotion. And it's also, you should buy the copy. There's only a few left. I don't think I've ever seen it. I haven't seen it since. But it's her personal photographs she had done. And
I published it myself.
she did. And also...
We only printed 300 copies.
and these are only 100 editions, limited editions. I'm selling it. But in there is original print. She signed, so you should grab it. There's only like 3 left. But anyway, and then we did Underworld, we did that horse, and then Kelly, Rizzoli's came to her, Charles did, and said, I want to reprint Pools, the first book, because it was a big seller, and it was very important, and it was great, and it was rare, too, at the same time. So they did it. It was very interesting what happened there. We couldn't get the originals back. It was impossible. And Sid Rapport had died, and the plant was closed. So all that film was destroyed. So there was no way of grabbing the original. So they did it, which was really interesting and fascinating. Digitally, they did it. And I have to tell you something really funny about the book. And in the original book, there was one mistake. And I flipped. And if I show it to you, the page, you won't be able to pick it up right away. But when you do see it, you say, oh my God. And so in the second printing, I've been waiting all these years for it to be reprinted and corrected. And so it was reprinted, and I couldn't wait to see the correction. And when I got to that page, it wasn't there. So that's a whole nother story. But I thought all these years I've waited for that correction, and it wasn't there. But they did end up correcting it later. And then Kelly came to me on this. She said, I want to do another Pools book. And that's how this Pools book began. But I think Kelly tell you, she didn't want it to be anything like the first one, but the size had to remain the same.
Yeah, I think the way I do my books is I come up with an idea of something that I'm a bit obsessed with. And I have become obsessed with pools. I wasn't obsessed with pools when I did the first book, but I've definitely become a bit obsessed with swimming pools and water and the whole idea of architecture in the ground and the shapes of pools that you can design. And but when I did the Underworld book, which was also done in the late 80s, it was a very crazy time in New York City. It was, Studio 54, and everyone was quite wild. And so I did this very sexy book on people partially dressed. And then I did a book on crosses 5 years later, and that was a very spiritual book to me. And I really love, not that I'm that religious, but I love the shape of the cross. I love so many things that are in the shape of the cross. So I started collecting photographs that are shaped like a cross, and then after that, I did the horse book, which is another. I'm obsessed with horses. I love horses, and that book was fantastic for me to do. And now I've done this new Pools book, and the difference, my books are I'm like the curator. I find hundreds and hundreds of different photographers' images, and I put them all together and produce these books. And then Sam designs them. But the difference between Pools 1 and Pools 2 is Pools 1 became almost like a history book. It's definitely an inspirational book, and if you want to build your pool, you can buy Pools 1 and get many ideas. But it's also the history of how the swimming pool evolved, and it was a public place where people would go in the 1900s and bring their families, and on weekends, and there were camps, and that's how and then eventually it became people who were, in the 20s started building their own private little pools or above ground pools, and in the 30s and 40s. And then obviously if you had a little bit of money, you put a pool in the ground in the 40s and the 50s, and it just sort of evolved into that book. It was the late 80s when the swimming pools were starting to become quite spectacular in their architecture. This new book was a challenge for me because I had to make it better than the first book. And the first book, became such a collectible, and it's very expensive if you want to buy it today, everyone loved that book, and I was like, how am I ever going to do a book as good as that one, and as beautiful and as interesting? And so I decided that this book had to be completely contemporary photographs. The original book has images in it from 1910 through the 20s, lots of vintage photography, lots of black and white Lartigue and Louis Stahl Wolf, and very, very famous photographers, as does this new book, but lots of vintage. And this book is all contemporary. It's a very modern pictures, maybe from the 70s till today. And it's, I've added a lot more art and sculpture in and around the swimming pool, and a lot more way of lighting the swimming pools. And it's very, very, very contemporary images and very contemporary architecture. There's still a lot of important art photographers in here, famous photographers, fashion photographers, and photographers that I found on Tumblr, that were on their holiday in Africa, and they happened to have posted it on Tumblr, on Facebook, and I found it, and then the challenge was to get it in high res, because there's a lot of beautiful photographs out there that people take all day long, and they're not in high res, and that's really disturbing for me, because I would find amazing pictures from unknown photographers, which I love to use people from just, photographs from people that we don't know, but they might not have shot it in high res, and you cannot blow it up this big and make it fit in that book and have it reproduce beautifully. So the big challenge was to find the beautiful pictures that I loved and then get them in high res. So that, took 4 years, as all my books take 4 or 5 years about to do, from beginning to when it's delivered to the store. So it's a real challenge, but I think that this new book, I think it's as good as the first book, but I don't know. I mean, I hope so.
I think it's better. Anyway, it's so funny she mentions high res, and I don't know anything about that. I just know I know the image, and so I have a wonderful art director, Betty Ng, and she would say to me, we laugh. I love the size. She said, well, you just can't do it. And it was so frustrating to sit there and say, what? I want it's got to be big. It has to. Look at the important it is. It just won't happen. And interesting, when you look at the book, there's a couple images in there that I know about that was shot with the iPhone and that shake like Polaroid. And everybody says that won't reproduce very well. Well, it's so gorgeous, I can't tell you. And it's to size, a little bit up, a little bit actual original size. And the book, I have to say, when we got the copy of it, I was overwhelmed by the printing. It's so beautiful. It's one of the best printed books I've seen. And knowing that you had such a variety of images to work with, and all different lights and different colors and different everything else, this book is amazing. And I have to thank Betty, because she became very good friends with the printer. And having that relationship was really, really important when you do a book, to have a printer there on your side with you, watching it all the way through. And but also, Kelly didn't say something. I worked at Interview also for a while as creative director, and she did a lot of fashion stories there too, which were really fantastic. So she didn't just do Marabella.
Yeah, Sam and I have worked together on not just the books, but also at the magazine. And he just, I don't know, he has, from working for Calvin for all those years, he really learned, I think, how to choose. When you have 500 images on the floor, Sam and I would work during the summer months out at the beach. I go to his house.
My favorite time.
And we'd sit on the grass and we'd lay out all the photographs all over the grass. And then he'd say, well, let's put this one next to this one. I'm like, how did you even know how to put that one next? Like, how would you even? And he would lay these images out and tell this beautiful story with all these books that he's done. And he learned to do that really well for Calvin, and he does it really beautifully for Bruce Weber, for Abercrombie, and all the Abercrombie books. They just tell these amazing stories, and he chooses. I mean, Bruce Weber hands him 2,000 images from a photo shoot, and he has to sit there and somehow tell a story with all these images and make a book. And it seems easy for him. It just is easy for him. I look at all the pictures and I can only look at them on the wall. I would have no idea how to put one opposite the other and have it, just flow so beautifully. And that's why I love working with Sam, because it's easy. He never stresses me out. He always says everything's gorgeous. Even if I turn in the ugliest picture, he goes, "Oh, it's gorgeous." And I'm like, "Really? I'm not so sure. Are you sure?" And he just, always makes me feel like it's going to be all right. And he's a fighter. And sometimes in publishing, you need somebody that fights for you. Fights for everything you really want, like the beautiful size and the right paper quality and the right printing, and to do the proofs and then redo the proofs if they're not right. And Sam's really good at being my...
Thank you, Kelly. I don't know.
He's my boxer.
But she's great too, believe me. But really the fun thing is when you work with someone like Kelly and Bruce and these people and all, we come from the same place, and it's just very important we feel that we have the same emotion most of the time, the same idea, we have the same love and the drive for it. And I think, you have to have someone like that really will trust you and you trust them, and I think that's the most important thing. And when we lay the book out, Kelly would come over, and it was great to have a line on the wall. That I work with little gazettes. I can't lay it out on a computer. I can lay the pages out in spreads. She'll come over and, "Oh my God, this is great." And then she'll say, "You know what? I don't really like that image." We will have a discussion about it, and it probably will come out. But Kelly's great because her eye is so beautiful, and that's what makes it really wonderful to work with her and people that you work with that have a great eye that you respect, and that's most important in the design of a book. And we had a great time with this one. I have to tell you, I'm really proud of this book. And
Really, it was the smoothest book we've done.
it is.
I don't know if it was because of the printer or made it really easy. Everything just looked great. When we saw the proofs, they were great. And it looked great from... Whereas my horse book, it was printed in China, and we really I chose a very difficult paper. It was probably my fault. I chose a very gritty, rough, dry, thick, matte paper that soaked up all the ink. So the ink just kept soaking in. The images were not coming out strong enough. And I chose that paper because I wanted the horse book to be kind of like horses, kind of gritty and filled with hay and straw and rough, and so I wanted that book to look kind of really real. And the Pools book, the paper we chose, was just gorgeous, and everything looked gorgeous on it. I mean, you couldn't.
But about the horse book, though, it's interesting. The paper she chose, it was really the right paper. The problem you have is when you communicate, especially, well, I'm just saying in China, that particular situation. We had Betty go over there and all. But when I look at that book, I have to tell you, it's just unbelievable to look at that, the way the paper you chose and the way those images come across. And you react emotionally to it because of that. It's really fabulous, but we didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then also we get the book and we said, "Oh my God, we were just shocked."
Paper to me is so important. It's like the floors of a building. When you have beautiful floors, everything else can look like shit, really. But if you have beautiful paper, then it really, everything else can sort of fake it, But the paper is so important. And I remember choosing for the cross book, the paper was quite slick and shiny. And it just worked for that book. And for horse book, it was tough and sort of gritty. And then this book, it was kind of like smooth and matte. And the first Pools book had beautiful paper too. And the Underworld book had paper more like the horse book, a little bit seedy and gritty, a little edgy. I guess edgy would be the right word. So the paper to me it tells the feeling of what I'm trying to get across, because I find that some books are so shiny and slick looking that I find the books look too shiny, too glossy. Architectural books can look like that, or So I think sometimes I like to bring the paper down and make it a more edgy paper, a more gritty paper, and I think it maybe helps the photograph not look like a stock photograph or not look like a cheap photograph. It just kind of makes, you know, even a photograph that's not that great have some integrity because the paper's so beautiful.
Well, does anyone have any questions? So like,
So you said there's no printer here in the city or in the U.S. anymore that you would use for this kind of book.
oh, there is. There's a couple, but you can't afford it. I mean, you know, there's one just closed.
Emotion.
Emotion was done here, but
In Connecticut.
that plant's closed.
Oh.
Right. Was Meridia did hers? Oh, that's right. But the people moved. Who published her book, Emotions, they're closed. And so now there's one great house. There really is. It's in upstate or up in Connecticut now. But you can't afford it. I mean, we just can't. I mean, you know, the book will cost $100-something, and then by the time you get onto the market, to the bookstore, it's a $400 book. You can't do it. But Italy is great, and Germany is too, especially with Steidl, and China. You know, that's everybody runs there because you can get a book that you can afford to sell. I prefer Italy, and and her book was done in Italy. It was just really great. It was a great, beautiful book.
Another thing about my books I forgot to mention is that in the early 90s, when I did the first book, a lot of my friends in the fashion business were getting sick, and they were dying of AIDS, and no one really knew what it was, and I was very much surrounded by people who were getting sick. And so when I did the first book, I had met Elizabeth Glaser at Deepak Chopra. I had gone to see Deepak Chopra for the weekend, and she was there, and she was sick. And she told me she was starting this foundation, Elizabeth Glaser's AIDS Foundation. And I guess I had started working on the Pools book, and I thought to myself, you know, maybe this is a way I can give back a little bit. I mean, I was, you know, young at the time, and you know, I just thought, well, maybe, I didn't know if these books made a lot of money or, you know, what it meant to even do a book, but I thought whatever money I do make, I'll give to her and her foundation. And she was very appreciative of that, and she eventually died. But every book that I've done since then, I chose a different foundation, AIDS Foundation, to give the money to. And I kind of like, for the Cross book, I chose God's Love Way to Deliver because it sounded sort of religious to me. And for the horse book, I chose the Equestrian AIDS Foundation because there's a lot of guys that ride and they need help sometimes. And, you know, so every book has sort of had this, I've been able to find a foundation, an AIDS foundation, that I've been able to give money to. And for this book, I chose Acrea, which is a great AIDS foundation here in New York City. And the way they get their money and raise their money a lot is through artists donating photographs, paintings, and then they have these wonderful dinners and parties throughout the year where you can buy through an auction really good art, and that's how they raise money for their foundation. And I was able to give them a nice check for the sell-through of this Pools book. So it helps me get a lot of photographers, a lot of famous photographers like to donate to my books because they know that I'm not keeping the money and going out and buying something with that money. I mean, you know, they know that it's going always to a nice cause. And so most of I would say 90% of the photographers that donate an image to all my books are, they do it because they know that it's for a good cause. And it helps me really put together 200 great, interesting images for each book with really talented people, talented photographers. So it sort of really worked for my books in the end. And I've been able to give away a good chunk of money every 5 years that I do these little books. Yes.
You have to answer my question. I'm wondering how you afforded all these photographers. I can see how.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are very, very thrilled to be asked, and obviously another very challenging, other than getting the picture that I love in high res, which is a whole other different complication now that nobody's using film anymore, but is getting the rights and permissions for all these photographers, and you have to have them sign off their image, so and that's really tricky. And they have all that, don't crop it, don't touch it, don't change the color, don't do anything to the picture. But sometimes that doesn't work with our format. So, Sam and I have to get on the phone, we have to send proofs, we have to, get down on our knees and kind of say, don't worry, we promise the book is so big, your picture's going to be so big that even if we crop a little bit of the sky out, it's okay, but some people are really strict and really, concerned about that. But we've been pretty lucky.
We have.
We've only had a couple of people that, are real sticklers to their image, which I understand.
I know you take great pictures, Kelly, so when can we expect a book of just your pictures?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's fun.
I know, but at one point Sam and I started the book about 5 years ago, and then I shelved it. It's on some shelf somewhere. I don't know.
She has done one. It's right over there called
did
Emotion.
one.
I'm promoting that book.
Emotion, which I only printed. I published it myself. I didn't even want to take it to a publisher. I printed it myself, and we printed 300 copies.
That's really small.
So it's over there. It's in purple, and you can.
It has original print with it.
Because you have to think like all these great books to do, and I have never seen your book.
She's got one. Did you see it?
I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, most of my images. I mean, I have a lot of personal
She
images.
has gorgeous images.
But a
believe me.
lot of my images are fashion, and I don't see myself right now as a fashion. I feel like I need another 20 years to shoot before I can do that book. I know. It's my problem.
I'm so curious about, because so many photographers out there that just random photographs, and yet I know Sam Shahid about it. And the idea of beginning and middle and end in this kind of book. Can you elaborate a little bit on how these books kind of evolve, and I know it's hard to describe the creative process, but how do you see it as kind of continuing versus just
It's hard for me to really, I don't know if I can really say it in words. It's just a feeling you have. When Kelly comes to me with her photographs, and they keep, they change, and she brings new ones in, more to the book at the beginning of it all. Not just, I'm just saying, you start seeing, then you just start, sometimes it takes me a while. I'll get like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? What am I doing? Sometimes it was actually a book that was a box on my floor was Bob Coachello's book out, and he had worked for Interview for all those years, and he had taken a lot of photographs for his article called Out and About, but they were never published, or they might have been, whatever it was. And also this box come into my office, and a friend of his said, you should look at this, see what you think. Is there a book here? And it's the same thing with Kelly and everybody. So I let the box sit there for like a month. I just didn't, I don't know, it takes me a few minutes or a while to get into this thing. And then all of a sudden, once I open it, and once we start, and then you just start like, oh my God, let's look at this thing. And you start feeling it, and you start moving it, and you start embedding them, scan them into download them into the computer and all. When Kelly came with her book and pools, we started, and she said, okay, what do we think we're going to do here? I said, I don't know, let's figure it out. So we talked, she and I did. And then I saw the photographs, and I started making a story from it. It just comes to me, and it's a rhythm that goes through. So it's not, when she mentioned about high res, and when those images have to be really small, it changes the rhythm. It changes the dynamics of it, and it just bothers me from the beginning to the middle and all. So you have to sort of like, okay, readjust your head and all. But it's just a feeling you get from it, it's a visual sense of it, and what's great with Kelly and everybody I've worked with and all, they see it, they react, oh my God, let's go, it's really great, and I see the rhythm of it. but it's a rhythm. It just is, and they connect. I see so many books sometimes where images are opposite each other and they really fight one another. They do not help one another. And sometimes you don't need to have two photographs on the same page. Or sometimes it helps when you do. It's just a gut feeling I have, a sensibility to it. It's hard to really talk about it so much as you're just there. You'll see it when you're there. When Kelly and I sit there together on the computer, and Betty's got us on the computer, we look. And, Kelly said there was one, I remember in this book particularly, there were a couple of places that was bothering her, and we resolved it. We said, okay, fine, maybe we shift it over here, and then we could see it. You lived with this thing for quite a while. You're back and forth with it. Yeah. She takes it home with her. She looks at it. She'll call me. I'm not sure about this, or I just love this. Whatever it is, we have a conversation about it. And then you look at this Gazette, and you keep looking at it, and you keep, as more you work with it, you'll start feeling this whole color balance and everything else. It's just a sense that you have. I don't know what it is. It's and as Betty can tell you, you start looking at that computer thing moving. It took me a while to understand that the computer thing. I'm always with my hands and touching everything. But we do that still. When it goes on, we lay it on the screen, and then she prints out tiny little gazettes, little thumbnails, and you start laying them on a board, moving it, And what's really interesting when you do layouts and all, is sometimes on the computer, on a Gazette, it's all flat and it rolls and it looks great. But what really you have to do is put a dummy together. When you start turning those pages, it takes a different life, and that's when you see how it moves, and then you know, oh my God, it stops here. Something's wrong here. Is when you do that. You can't just look on the screen and keep rolling it and think that's the end of it. It's not. You need to have a real, actual physical dummy in your hand to start seeing how it turns and moves. That's the only thing I can tell you how. I don't know. I don't know. I don't really know, do I?
We have time for one more question. If anyone has another question? Great. Well, thank you so much, Kelly and Sam.
Thank you.